Hello, I'm Mary Lou Aleskie, the director of the Hopkins Center for the Arts, and welcome to tonight's conversation between Associate Professor of Theater at Dartmouth, Monica Ndounou, and internationally acclaimed actor, writer, educator, Roger Guenveur Smith. We're about at the halfway point in this week-long symposium on police violence, and I want to take a minute to both thank and congratulate the faculty team and all who are collaborating to organize this powerful, far-reaching, and comprehensive symposium. It's been incredibly impactful and inspiring. Throughout the week, the arts have had a central role in these discussions. The arts have a way of amplifying our stories. Placing artists at the center of important conversations of our time deepens our connections to each other, the stories we must hear, and the work we must do. The Hopkins Center is honored to be invited to participate in this project and appreciates the opportunity to share with our community relationships with artists who are impacting the world. Roger Guenveur Smith is no stranger to Dartmouth and the Hopkins Center. Perhaps best known for his collaborations with Spike Lee, Roger's theatrical works are historically infused solo plays that target the very core of our humanity. Roger first appeared at the Hopkins Center in the late 90s in his Obie Award-winning A Huey P story. Most recently, in 2018, in collaboration with the International Black Theater Summit, led by Professor Ndounou, the HOP presented Roger's work, Frederick Douglass Now. Tonight, recognizing the 30th anniversary of Rodney King's brutal beating by the LA police, Roger joins Professor Ndounou in a conversation about his work, Rodney King, police violence, and much, much more. We hope you all had the opportunity to watch Rodney King on the Netflix link provided to all registrants to the symposium. If you haven't had the chance to watch Spike Lee's film of Roger's live performance, please spend an hour with this riveting document. The link will be available to you until Sunday. It's also widely available on Netflix. I'm happy to share that this conversation kicks off a long-term residency at the Hopkins Center with Roger during the coming 21-22 academic year. We anticipate a year of interdisciplinary teaching, classes, research, perhaps even leading to some new work from Roger. Collaborations with Professor Ndounou and others are already being planned. The HOP anticipates being able to present Roger's most recent work on the father of Anne Frank, Otto Frank, as well. If you're interested in working with Roger or thinking about how his art might intersect with your own research and teaching, please be in touch with us at the Hopkins Center. Professor Monica Ndounou is hosting our conversation tonight, and in addition to her teaching in the Department of Theater, Professor Ndounou is deeply involved in interdisciplinary research projects, theater making, and teaching. She is founding executive director of the Craft Institute, an organization dedicated to the eradication of exclusionary practices that make it impossible for underrepresented groups to gain entry and excel in arts and entertainment. Upon her arrival at Dartmouth in 2017, she seized the moment and led the campus in a forward-facing celebration of the 20th anniversary of August Wilson's landmark residency as a Montgomery Fellow and his historic convening on Black Theater on Golden Pond that launched the International Black Theater Summit. She's an innovator, theater maker, scholar, and mom. Thank you, Dr. Ndounou, for hosting tonight's conversation with Roger Guenveur Smith. Before turning the stage over to Monica, I want to remind you all that immediately following this talk, the Department of Theater launches its three-part series, Radical Joy, at 8 p.m. on Hop at Home. It can be accessed through the Hopkins Center's website and is intended to be part of the symposium week. With that, please welcome Monica Ndounou to the digital stage to get us started.
Good evening, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here. I just really want to thank all of the organizers and the sponsors of this event for organizing this conversation, week-long conversations around police violence, and especially for bringing Roger Guenveur Smith back to campus. We're so excited to have Roger for this conversation and also for the year-long residency that is forthcoming. So without further ado, I'm just going to bring Roger in, actor, director, writer, and I would say visionary. Looking forward to this conversation.
Good to be in conversation with you, Monica. Thank you so much for having me all. Wonderful to return to Dartmouth. I wish I could do it in person, but this is the way we've got to do it right now. So I am in your virtual hearts and minds, I hope. This is a tremendous moment that we're living. This is a tremendous day, a tremendous week of loss, looking at loss, assessing loss, but recommitting ourselves, as always, to progress, and knowing that progress is impossible without struggle, because if there is no struggle, there is no progress. That was the rap of Brother Frederick Douglass. And you heard Douglass do that rap not too long ago at Dartmouth. And I think, as always, Douglass continues to resonate in the American mind and in the American heart. We must always, I think, go to the past, so-called, in order that we build towards our future. In doing so, I have invested in what I call performing history, which is digging into the archives and hopefully coming up with some new work for the stage, which is sometimes translated into the screen as well. Right. And most of you, I think, have had the opportunity to see Rodney King, which is a solo performance, which played all over the world, and then played all over the world again on screens, because we documented it. It was directed by my longtime colleague, Mr. Spike Lee. And Spike and I have been working together for a while now. In fact, 30 years of collaboration behind us, but I should hope that we have a lot ahead of us as well.
I think the first time I was introduced to your work was actually through a Spike Lee film, Do the Right Thing.
Yes.
Which also centers on police violence in Black communities. So I was hoping maybe we could talk a little bit about how you got started and how you select your roles in the projects that you've worked on with Spike Lee and other projects. And then we can talk a little bit more specifically about Rodney King and how you came to that.
Sure. Frederick Douglass was my first solo performance. It was as an undergraduate, actually, at Occidental College, where I did my undergrad work in American Studies. I did a lot of history, a lot of literature. I took some theater classes. And when it, there's a clip from Frederick Douglass now. That was not when I was at Occidental College. That was at Wellesley, not that long ago. But I was inspired by a man whom we just lost, Hal Holbrook, who had done a one-man show on Mark Twain called Mark Twain Tonight. And I was fascinated by how Mr. Holbrook was able to transform himself into a historical character and make us believe that that character was with us and breathing the same air that we were. And Holbrook actually started work on Mark Twain when he was an undergraduate in the 1950s and worked as Twain actually just until a few years ago. I took my daughter to see him play Mark Twain in San Diego, and he was fantastic. And I'm glad that I was able to share it with her.
Yeah.
And so that was the first thing, an evening with Frederick Douglass, which was
Wow.
far too long an evening. Even my own mom said it was too long. I need to edit. You know, when your mom's are saying you need to cut it, you need to cut it. So I've been cutting ever since. And they have continued to play Frederick Douglass in many ways, in the same way that Holbrook played Mark Twain. I was invited, in fact, to do a new version of Frederick Douglass, which I call Frederick Douglass Now, by the late, great Ellen Stewart, who was the founder and director of La Mama Experimental Theater Club in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And Ellen invited us to come out from Cali and do a whole new version of Douglass with pre-recorded video imagery, live video imagery, film projection, slide projection. It was quite a moment. And the moment was particularly distinguished because the final matinee, the closing show of Frederick Douglass Now at La Mama, was the same day that Nelson Mandela walked out of prison.
What?
After 27 years.
Wow.
Of incarceration. And we had screamed Free Nelson Mandela. We had screamed Free Mandela. And Mandela walked out of Robben Island prison. And Ellen Stewart, my sister, came out and rang a big bell. And
wow, that's incredible. So you have had a history of portraying these prominent historical figures that have really been about fighting for justice and fighting for freedom. So can you talk a little bit more about how you transitioned from that project about Frederick Douglass, and then started your collaborations with Spike Lee?
Well, I had actually preceded that version of Frederick Douglass with a couple of films with Spike. The first one being School Days, where I played a demented fraternity pledge in Gamma Phi Gamma at a fictitious college called Mission College. And then I did a film called Do the Right Thing, in which I improvised a character by the name of Smiley.
Right.
Who says at the beginning of the film, "Good morning, my name is Smiley, and this is Malcolm," and he holds a picture of Malcolm, and this is Martin, and Malcolm and Martin are shaking hands. Now they are dead, but we still have to fight against the apartheid. So the theme was articulated there through this man, obviously with a speech impediment, so-called, but who was probably the most politically articulate character in that film.
Which is an incredibly powerful statement. I wonder if we could take a moment and just show the clip, the reel of all of these different roles so we can go more deeply into them.
Oh, great. I feel like I'm on Johnny Carson's show.
We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power. Fight the power. Yeah, my good morning. My name is Smiley. This is Malcolm. And this is Martin King. Now they're dead. But we still have to fight
begins. The part hate.
Who's Rudy?
I'm half wop, I'm half nigga, I'm not afraid of nobody.
All right. I did too, so I owe you two, right?
You got it.
I got it. What'd you say?
He says I got it.
One big happy family.
Gary Rivers.
So how come you're going to the march, Gary?
What?
The march, you know, how come you're going?
I guess if the brothers are getting together, you know, talking about some things, trying to work things out, I won't be there. Right? Right. So where you going to school, man? You made up your mind?
Not yet.
Look, you pygmy motherfucker.
Not a pygmy.
You want to walk to school? Big time is cool, all right? I'll kick your ass out to the curb right now. I mean, my bad and all, my bad. Don't make me get violent early in the morning, really. I ain't had my coffee, you know what I'm saying?
Didn't I take you to Yankee Stadium? Didn't you meet Mickey Mantle? He signed a baseball to Louis from Mickey Mantle?
Motherfucker, Mick. Willie Mays was a man.
Get out of here.
Mick was the guy.
He was the guy. Come on. All right, enough.
However, okay, we dealt with Vietnam. Let's deal straight up with the streets of Oakland and just say that we want an immediate end to police brutality and stop the murder of black people. Stop the murder of black people. Stop the murder of black people. Look, hold on. I got vamped on by some pigs on my way over here this evening. That's why I call them pigs, because the pig is a rather low-life animal. Pig had the audacity to ask me what I'm doing with my gun. I say, pig, what you doing with yours?
Listen, could you give your sister a message for me, please?
Well, that's going to depend on the message.
We got word in the home office that your sister has a young son, a teenager by the name of Homer Worthy. I'm sure you know that young black boys on the South Side are more than likely to be shot and or killed.
2, 3, 4.
11. You were never that good at math. 15. You spitting blood.
Fight the power! Fight the power! We got to fight the powers that be!
Wow. That is an incredible range of roles, Roger.
Well, thank you. You know, a couple of them were cops.
I know, and that's what I want to get to. So again, as we know that you've played these incredible historical figures, and you've also played contemporary roles, like the role of the policeman in Get on the Buses, and also Chirac.
I was an insurance salesman in Chirac.
Okay.
I could have been working with the police, but I was a policeman in Summer of Sam as well.
That's right.
Also a big fan of Willie Mays.
Yeah.
Number 24.
Thank you for clarifying. So I want to ask you, as we're, having these conversations over the course of this week about police violence, I've been thinking a lot about something Nina Simone said, which is the duty of an artist is to reflect the times. And it seems to me that throughout your career, that's really what every role you've taken seems to do, is to reflect the times. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about even specifically what it was like to play a police officer and Get on the Bus. That's the one that I remember. That was a really complicated.
It was, because we didn't know probably until halfway through the film that he was a cop, that he actually revealed that, and that his father was a police officer as well, who had died in the line of duty and
Right.
been killed by another black man.
Right.
And there was another brother who was going to the march on the same bus, who revealed that he had killed any number of people, never did any time for it. And because this officer my character had heard him reveal this, he felt that he had the duty to arrest him. as soon as they crossed back over into California, when they returned from the Million Man March. So yes, there was a lot of complication here. I think it's a tremendously underrated film. I think a lot of people thought that it was a documentary for some reason. And I think that the late, great Ossie Davis should have had an Oscar.
Yeah.
The extraordinary work that he did as the elder on the bus, Jeremiah, who had a little drum with him, and he had his medication, and he had found a certain bliss in corporate America, and he had lost that. And it was a very moving performance, and Ossie wrote a lot of his dialogue. He came with it because, of course, he was a tremendous writer as well as a performer.
Right.
So that was a really special thing that we achieved on that little bus. Over the course of, I think we shot for 15 days or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that film, and I think what stood out to me is it was an incredible ensemble piece. The way all of the stories wove together in that piece. And I'm curious, what is it like for you, the difference for you in working as part of an ensemble and telling these stories that reflect the times, as opposed to the solo work that you tend to do as well?
I enjoy both challenges. The solo stuff is a lot more, economically geared. You can kind of do it on the cheap.
Right.
Ensemble stuff, you got to pull it together with a lot more economic push there. But I enjoy both challenges, and certainly that ensemble, my gosh. And Get on the Bus was tremendous, and the range, the eclectic range of characters that we had on the bus was extraordinary as well. But I've been in some great, ensemble pieces. King of New York is certainly one of them.
Right.
Deep Clippers is one of them.
Yeah.
American Gangster.
Yeah.
Ensemble piece where I got to work with Denzel again. So, I'm geared towards both experiences, on screen and on stage as well. I enjoyed playing ensemble work on stage as well as solo performance.
So can you talk a little bit about process and how you're preparing for the work that you're doing? Let's more specifically talk a little bit about Rodney King.
Sure.
And, number one, what brought you to Rodney King? And then what was your process for how you decided to tell that story?
Rodney King, when he was beaten, March 3rd, 1991, I was not surprised. I'm a Black man. I grew up in LA, dealing with the LAPD all my life. So that he was beaten in the way that he was beaten was not surprising. The world saw it for the first time because my man George Holliday was out there with his new cam, and he was testing it out. And lo and behold, there's all this light coming down from the LAPD helicopters, and he was just testing out his new camera. And lo and behold, that's what he captured. Within a week, we were on stage with a piece called Chaos TV, in which I was standing up as kind of a news commentator. I've got a huge map of LA behind me, and I'm projecting that LA is going to catch on fire, that there's going to be conflagrations all over LA, and I point to certain places on the map. So in a way, we predicted what was going to happen a year down the line with Los Angeles, and we did it theatrically. My man Mark Broyard was out on the street. Mark and I had a duet called Inside the Creole Mafia, a not too dark comedy. And Marky B was out on the corner giving people proper cover-up techniques. Say, if you're a black man, here's what you need to learn. You need to protect your cranium, protect your genitals. Here's how you do that. And we demonstrated that for folks. Kim Nickerson, another colleague, was reporting from the street because at that point in LA, there were dozens and dozens of black women who were being disappeared. And we found out years and years later that it was the grim sleeper, who had murdered these women. And so she reminded us that it was not just black male bodies that were vulnerable, but there were women out there who were extraordinarily vulnerable, and it wasn't necessarily an LAPD operation, right? So that was our first take on Rodney King. The next take was in '92, after the conflagration, the insurrection, the riot, the uprising, the rebellion, whatever you want to call it, in April, May of '92, because of what went down with Officers Kuhn, Powell, Brasino, and Wind, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. So it also, in '92, happened to be the 500th anniversary of the so-called discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. So we had to take that moment on as well. So we play Columbus as a man who is still among us, who's a lounge entertainer with political aspirations, who runs a travel agency on the side. And he promises a song, a dance, and a magic trick. And the magic trick that he promises is that he will be transformed before your very eyes into a black man.
Wow.
So I bring Mark Anthony Thompson, my longtime collaborator, sound designer extraordinaire, into the theater, give him a Happy Meal, because he's holding up a sign that says, "We'll work for food." He DJs for me, and eventually he electrocutes me 56 times with those same 56 blows that Rodney King got. And lo and behold, he is Christopher Columbus transformed into a black man. Not just any black man. He's transformed into a kid by the name of Juan Perez, who was a kid, true story, who on a dare jumped into the polar bear cage in the Brooklyn Zoo. And he was devoured by the polar bear. And the next day, the tabloids had a picture of his corpse with a quote of his last words: "Help, mommy, they're biting me hard," which I felt was really representative of how urban youth were faring in Reagan's America. So what Mark Anthony Thompson brilliantly did was he went to the speech of Ronald Reagan in the 1992 Republican National Convention, where he says, in America, it's not history that matters as much as our destination. And he takes that voice and he slows it down eventually to a growl, so that Ronald Reagan then becomes the polar bear that devours Christopher Columbus as Juan Perez. And then Mark Anthony Thompson jumps down off of the DJ stand and snatches Columbus's gold chain off his neck and runs out of the theater.
And so this project led you.
So Columbus's big hit, his big hit single, was a thing called "Do the Rodney King." They got a new dance sensation moving across this nation. They're even doing it on the Indian reservation. run. They do the king, king, king. Do the Rodney King, 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 king. Do the Rodney King, king, king. See? And that's how it all ties together.
Yeah, I think what really stands out for me with that is thinking about the ways in which Black bodies in pain, being devoured, being dehumanized, get circulated through the media.
Oh yeah, this was a tabloid, big pic of this kid, Juan Perez, body half beaten and half eaten by a polar bear.
Right.
Fast forward to our present moment.
Yeah. So thinking about, and the sad part is, and thinking about Rodney King, and even this present moment, the Chauvin trial is taking place right now for the murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
And, during the time that Rodney King was beaten by the police, as you noted, this was one of the first times people who live outside of Black communities had seen this type of thing. Right. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, like, how do you see this moment playing out? I know you predicted back in 1991 what was going to happen post-trial for 1992. Having lived with the story of Rodney King for so long and so many different forms of telling the story, I'm curious how you're experiencing this particular moment.
Well, I woke up on Father's Day, June 2012, and found that Rodney King had expired in his backyard swimming pool. And I felt as if I had lost a blood brother. I wanted to know why I felt that. Why did I feel that way? Why did I feel that for Rodney King? And by the first week of August, I was on stage trying to work it out, right?
Right.
But since then, right, this thing called America has continued to happen. And I thought that Rodney King was going to be just a little meditation, a little prayer, if you will, for that season of mourning. But again, this thing called America continued to happen. And, this trial, of course, is weighing on me as it is weighing on all of us. And I think for me, the most astonishing and disturbing moment was the testimony of the young people in particular who witnessed the state-sanctioned asphyxiation of George Floyd. Daniela Frazier was 17 years old at that time. She was with her 9-year-old cousin who was wearing a Love t-shirt, who had to absorb that and also had to negotiate with their internal spirit because they felt that they had failed George Floyd.
Right.
2 girls had failed a big man because they hadn't interceded, because all they had done was shout and scream, "Please don't kill him. Don't you see what you're doing to him?" And focused a camera through a telephone. But it was the posting of that that allowed the world to see the brutality, the inhumanity of a multiracial police force.
Right.
Which included 2 white policemen, 1 Asian policeman, and yes, 1 Black policeman as well.
Yeah, which I think is absolutely important to note that. I think going back to Rodney King and some of the parallels that I see in that moment and this one, and even how the story is circulating in the media, is it makes me think about the section in the play where you talk about Latasha Harlins.
Right.
And because we're thinking about violence on a really large scale and where it's coming from, the role that white supremacy is playing in whether it's the police violence and violence amongst communities. That like in particular, we had talked earlier about the ways in which the death of Latasha Harlins, or the murder of Latasha Harlins, was circulated in the media almost as a counterpoint to the assault against Rodney King. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I think that's very important. It happened in the same month, actually. And, you know, Latasha Harlins, for those of you who don't know, you'll know more if you see the Rodney King film, but she was a 15-year-old girl who simply went into a convenience store to get some orange juice, and the proprietor of the store felt that Latasha was trying to shoplift, which she was not. She had $2 in her hand for $1.79 bottle of orange juice. And the woman behind the counter took a swing at Latasha. Latasha took a swing back and slammed the orange juice down on the counter and turned her back to the woman behind the counter. The woman went into a little drawer and pulled out a small caliber pistol and shot Latasha Harlins in the back of the head, dead. And she went to the ground with the $2 still in her hand. And all of this was caught on the security cam, which the LAPD made sure that they would disseminate throughout the media, so that, as you suggest, the demon, the villain, then in the Black community becomes Korean merchants rather than the LAPD, you know, who had been demonized, who had demonized themselves through the beating of Rodney King. And also, the beating of Rodney King happened on the outskirts of LA, off of the freeway. Rodney King did not live in central Los Angeles. He lived in Altadena, which is an integrated community in the foothills. And Latasha was a girl who lived right there in central Los Angeles. And the loss of Latasha was felt very deeply. The image that you just saw was a beautiful new mural that was created. There are many people who continue to be inspired and continue to be outraged by what happened to her and the outrageous lack of justice which was served on her behalf.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the things that I really appreciate too. Sorry, that's my 5-year-old is.
That's it. That's it.
Crashing the show.
Not crashing the show. That's why we're doing the show.
Yeah.
This is why we're doing the show. I locked my door, so.
Yeah.
Running up in
I forgot that move, Roger. I was so eager to talk to you. I didn't lock the door. But yeah, I was saying that one of the things that I really appreciated too about Rodney King, like I've seen it before, but I watched it again this week, and it just resonated for me differently than it did. I think I saw it like maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
And what was really profound to me is the great, like all of the tiny little details that you bring in to share his experience of what it was like for him to have experienced this brutality and then to have to live and carry this with him, you know, beyond that moment, and how he was experiencing the riots as well as how he was experiencing life beyond that. So could you tell me just a little bit of what it was like for you having to live with this material for so long? Because that he carried a lot of trauma. You talk about the intergenerational trauma he experienced, in addition to the violence he experienced and the threats on his life that he experienced from across the board. So that must have been really heavy for him to carry. What was that like for you as an artist, living with the material?
Well, the first thing that I did, I think for my own sanity, but also strategically for the narrative, is that I struck the word I out of the piece in reference to Roger. I never wanted particularly to be in the piece specifically. Obviously, I'm in it because it's a solo performance and I'm the solo performer and I'm playing all the roles, but I didn't want the Roger reference in it. So I struck that, and I think that served me well.
Right.
And I think I found a way of improvising the narrative, because it was improvised, except for the first part, which was an excerpt from a rap by Willie D, which was very anti-Rodney King rap, to, of course, Rodney's speech at the end, which I do in its entirety. Right. But I found an interesting way to kind of throw questions out to Rodney, to be a kind of interrogator even, therapist even. And obviously those questions were never going to be answered. And I think that questions can be as interesting as answers. You know, it's said when people do therapy, they do Reiki treatment, they do massage, that they have to touch stone or touch wood in order to let that spirit go, whatever it is that they've absorbed. And I definitely felt that, I think, in doing the Rodney King thing. But I feel that all the times. I mean, I felt that when I had to play Christopher Columbus and be that kid at the end, crying, "Ayúdame, mommy, he's biting me hard." You know, to bring that within and then release it for the audience in this crazy thing that we do call theater. We hope that we can get back to very, very soon, because it's essential for this thing called human civilization.
It truly is.
But it's good to be in the box with you.
For sure. So Roger, is there anything that you would like to share with our audience this evening that maybe I didn't ask you about, in terms of your work, or even, you know, how you're experiencing this moment, you know, as an artist, and being able to share more? Or, you know, I know you've been speaking with folks about some of the things that you're working on and the work that you have done. Is there anything that you would want to share, especially to young artists who would be interested in doing, you know, material like this?
Breath is imperative. And when we did Rodney King in New York, outside on the hottest night of the summer, and Spike had the crew out there, and I did Rodney King's great American speech, can we get a walk? I appended some other words to the end of that speech. I can't breathe. Now, Rodney King didn't say that. It was Eric Garner who said that.
Right.
A New Yorker in Staten Island, not far away from where I was playing Rodney King. And then we heard that again. I can't breathe. And again, I can't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Elijah McClain in Colorado. Who went to a convenience store inconveniently and was assaulted and eventually killed by the Aurora Police Department. And the first thing that he says is, I can't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm different. I'm just going home. I live right there. Ow, you're hurting me. I didn't mean to do that. He throws up on them. I'm sorry. Everywhere within these experiences, within these tragedies, there are, of course, great monologues.
Mm-hmm.
And August Wilson, of course, was the master of that, because he could go into a cafe, a bar, and hear one little slice of language.
Yeah.
Write it down on a matchbook or a napkin, and then that would become a speech, and that would become a character, and that would become a play, and that would become a decade.
Right.
And then that would be repeated 9 more times as he pledged. And then he stepped off the planet.
Yeah.
So the message is, don't let anybody take your breath from you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a precious thing. And always observe. Always listen. Always watch if you are endowed with hearing and sight.
Mm-hmm.
People ask me, where did Smiley come from, man? Where'd you come up with that? And I didn't realize until months after I had created that character that there was a man who sold the LA Sentinel, the black newspaper, every Thursday night on the corner of Western and Santa Barbara Avenue, and my father would go to buy the paper from him, and I would look up to this guy, and he would say to my father, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was in high school, there was this guy who was a great athlete in my high school, but he got hit by a truck. And he became the locker room attendant. He passed out towels. And he talked like that too. But he had this amazing memory for all kinds of athletic statistics. He could tell you what game, what score, whatever year.
Mm-hmm.
But I never knew that those two gentlemen had an influence on my creation of Smiley until after I had done Smiley.
Mm-hmm.
Which is to say that we are vessels. And we are here to absorb and to share what we have absorbed. And again, I think it's an essential process to which I hope we can return very, very soon.
Me too.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that students and faculty who might be interested in working with you when you return to campus next year? Can you tell us a little bit about your process in creating some of these works? And so we can, really think about the ways in which we might be able to all come together on campus to do something together.
Well, let's do a thing called performing history.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what I do, in which my students are encouraged to dig into the archives of their choice to find something that can work theatrically. And, it can be autobiography in progress. It can be a deep, deep personal story, or it can be, a historical character, or it can be a historical fiction. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done there. Oddly enough, it was Rodney King who took me to my latest solo performer, the father of the diarist Anne Frank.
Right.
I was invited to an international theater festival in Amsterdam to do Rodney King, and while I was there, I went, of course, to the Anne Frank house, and it was there that I was inspired. Walking into that small space, thinking of that man coming back from the camp, having lost his wife and their 2 daughters, and being alone in that place with this diary in his hand that had been a gift from him to his daughter for her 13th birthday.
Right.
And that really, that just little spark of experience sparked an entirely new piece, which speaks, not simply to the 1940s, but it speaks to our present moment.
Right.
A very recent past, and in fact, when we had a U.S. president to go to the border with Mexico and saw the erection of a barbed wire fence and said that there was nothing more beautiful in the world than barbed wire when used properly.
Well, fortunately, we don't have to listen to that foolishness anymore.
Well, I would like to think that, but we will move forward with other language and other narratives, and we will be getting up and we will be standing up.
We absolutely will. And along those lines, my last question for you is, you mentioned August Wilson and the 10-play cycle.
Yeah.
You have done your solo pieces with Huey P. Newton, Frederick Douglass, Rodney King, now Otto Frank. Do you have a certain number of figures that you would like to portray?
Not necessarily. I haven't even counted the ones I have portrayed. But each one has come with its own peculiar challenge. Maybe the oddest one was when I did Juan Marichal and John Roseboro, great baseball players, 2 black men with essentially the same name, who got into the most notorious fight in baseball history. Marichal hit Roseboro upside the head with his bat. And playing them both on stage was extraordinary. To play Juan Marichal in front of him, to play John Roseboro in front of his daughter and in front of his widow, extraordinary experience. So, playing someone who is deceased is one thing, but to actually play someone in front of them as it is something altogether strange. I don't know how Anna Devere Smith does it. She interviews these people and then has them sit in the audience and watches her play them.
Yeah, we're going to have a conversation with the both of you and talk about this performing history. That would be awesome.
That would be a great conversation.
Yeah.
I saw her moderate a conversation between Robert Brustein and August Wilson at Town Hall.
Oh, yeah. I read about that.
You read about it.
Oh, yeah.
I was there, and it was quite an evening.
Awesome. Well, Roger, I think we are almost out of time. So I just wanted to take a moment again to thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for your work. I'm so excited to work with you when you come to campus. It'll be good to hang out again. And again, we appreciate you and look forward to speaking more soon.
I appreciate you. Thank you for holding it down in the woods. It is beautiful there, but it is not just a physical beauty that you are cultivating on that campus, but it is a new dawn of great work, not just academically and artistically, but I would like to say spiritually as well. I'm not ashamed and I'm not afraid to say that spirit is our guide.
Absolutely. And with that, I would just like to say to all the students that are listening, any artists out there, and anybody who's just generally interested in this creative work and what it does for the world, this may be a difficult moment for us. But again, as Nina Simone said, it is the duty of the artist to reflect the times. So let us all get to work reflecting. Thank you.
Thank you.